In your book, Cold Case Christianity, you investigate Christianity like a homicide detective investigates a case. So what skills does a police detective use that you have found useful in investigating the claims of Christianity?
Well, there's only two forms of evidence, okay? So there's direct evidence and there's indirect evidence, and those are the forms of evidence we use in criminal trials. And you know, most people would probably think that direct evidence is in some ways superior because indirect evidence is also called circumstantial evidence. And you hear all the time people say things like, you know, all they have is a circumstantial case, or it's purely circumstantial, as if to say that the case really isn't good evidentially, because they think of these two forms that direct evidence is superior. Now, it turns out that we instruct jurors that to treat both forms of evidence exactly the same in their deliberation. None's to be given any weight, greater weight than the other. Now, the two forms are direct evidence is of one kind. It is eyewitness testimony. If you don't have an eyewitness who can testify, you don't have a direct evidence case. Everything else, if you have like DNA evidence or fingerprint evidence or forensic evidence from materials or gunshot residue, whatever it might be, that's all considered indirect evidence, and we would also call that circumstantial. And when you're working cold cases, that's really all you have. But I'll tell you this, any claim about the past, even if the past was just 3 hours ago when a murder occurred, it really is going to come, if you have eyewitnesses, the question really becomes then, do I trust what these people, are they truly eyewitnesses, first of all, or are they just making that claim falsely? And if they are, how can I test them in some way to trust them? So a lot of the skills that we talk about in cold case Christianity and that I applied as a 35-year-old who had no experience of the church at all, living in a very secular part of Los Angeles County where there weren't a lot of Christians. I didn't know any Christians growing up. You know, how do I even approach these claims that are in Scripture? Could I test them? Were they early enough to really have been from the pen of an eyewitness? Is John really the eyewitness that is recording the Gospel of John? Is Matthew really the eyewitness that's recording the Gospel of Matthew? Is Mark really recording the statements of Peter in Rome, as the Bishop Papias says early in church history? And then you've got Luke, who's an eyewitness at the book of Acts, and then says in the Gospel of Luke that he's interviewing those who were at first eyewitnesses and servants of the word. So the question is, could I test these accounts to see if they're reliable? And that's really the emphasis of my approach, only because, honestly, that's what I did to navigate these claims myself for the first. I actually thought that all Christians did this, right? I mean, why would you trust what someone's telling you about the Bible? Doesn't everyone test it somehow in some manner, either historically or I had this skill set? But it turns out most of us don't really probably become Christians for any of those reasons, but that was my journey.